bloating. Every single person dealing with it right now has one thing in common. And it's not your food, not gluten, not dairy, not FODMAPs. I did a video on gut health and bloating years ago, millions of views. But I just found research that changes everything. Here's what nobody is telling you. A massive portion of people who are chronically bloated have tried every elimination diet, every low FODMAP protocol, every digestive enzyme on the market. They still wake up puffy, still go to bed looking pregnant, and it has nothing to do with what they ate. It has everything to do with what one hormone is doing right now to their kidneys, their gut lining, and their intestinal motility. And once I show you the mechanism, you're going to realize the fix is nothing like what you've been told. So here's what's actually happening inside your body. Your gut wall is lined with smooth muscle. That muscle creates wave-like contractions called peristalsis that push food, gas, and waste through your digestive tract. When peristalsis is working, gas clears, waste moves, your abdomen stays flat, but certain hormones bind directly to receptors on that smooth muscle and tell it to stop contracting, not slow down. Stop. When that muscle goes quiet, gas gets trapped. Stool accumulates. The bacteria in your gut start fermenting everything sitting still. That fermentation produces hydrogen, carbon dioxide, and methane in your intestines, which have a very small diameter, so even a small volume of trapped gas causes visible, painful distension. But that's only half the picture. The same hormonal shift that freezes your gut motility also signals your kidneys to hold on to sodium. And wherever sodium goes, water follows. So now you have two things happening simultaneously: trapped gas, pushing your abdomen out from the inside, and fluid accumulating in your tissue, making your entire abdomen feel tight, heavy, and swollen from the outside. That's why hormonal bloating feels different. It's not localized. It's not relieved after a bowel movement. It doesn't change with what you ate. It's diffuse, systemic. It shows up in your face, your hands, your feet, and it follows a pattern, monthly, or triggered by stress, or worsening gradually over years. This is not a gut problem. The hormone driving all of this sits at the intersection of your reproductive system, your stress response, and your metabolism. And once I name it and show you exactly what's knocking it out of balance, everything is going to make sense. So let's name it. The hormone at the center of this is estrogen, specifically what happens when estrogen rises too high or rises without enough of its counterbalancing hormone, progesterone, to keep it in check. That state is called estrogen dominance, and it is far more common than most people realize. Before you click away, this is not just a women's health video. Estrogen dominance affects men too, and even in women, most doctors are not connecting it to bloating. They're looking at your gut, running food sensitivity panels, recommending probiotics. Meanwhile, the actual driver is sitting in your hormone panel, hiding in plain sight. Here's what elevated estrogen does that nobody talks about. Estrogen stimulates your liver to produce a protein called angiotensinogen. That protein kicks off a hormonal cascade ending with your kidneys receiving one signal: hold on to sodium. Do not let it go. And as your kidneys retain sodium, water is pulled into your tissues, not into your bloodstream where it can be filtered, into the spaces between your cells, your abdomen, your face, your ankles. That is hormonal water retention, real, measurable, and completely unrelated to anything you ate. But here's where it gets more specific. When estrogen rises without enough progesterone to balance it, the bloating compounds. Because under normal conditions, progesterone acts as a natural brake on that sodium-retaining system. It competes for the same receptor aldosterone uses in the kidney. When progesterone is adequate, it blocks aldosterone. Fluid gets excreted. But when progesterone drops during the luteal phase, during perimenopause, or under chronic stress, that brake is released. Aldosterone operates unopposed. Sodium retention accelerates, and your body holds on to fluid it was supposed to excrete days ago. This is why the bloating follows a pattern. Peaks the week before your period, worsens in your late 30s and 40s, flares under stress. It is not random. It is hormonal. It is predictable. And it has a very specific fingerprint. It doesn't respond to dietary restriction. Low FODMAP doesn't touch it. Cutting gluten doesn't touch it. Digestive enzymes don't touch it. If you've tried all of those and you're still bloated, that treatment resistance is the diagnostic clue. Your body is telling you the root is upstream of your gut entirely. But estrogen dominance is only the first layer, because there's a second hormone, one connected directly to what you eat every single day, that's making all of this dramatically worse. And this is the part that most people never hear about, because it has nothing to do with digestion, nothing to do with your gut bacteria.
Mhm.
It runs through a completely different organ entirely. Here's the part that shocked me when I first found this research. Most people assume carbohydrate-induced bloating is a gut problem. You eat too many carbs, bacteria ferment them, you produce gas, you bloat. That mechanism is real, but it is not the whole story. There is a second pathway through which carbohydrates cause bloating, completely separate from digestion, and it runs entirely through your kidneys. Here's the mechanism. You eat carbohydrates, blood sugar rises, your pancreas releases insulin to bring it back down. Normal, expected. But here's what the textbooks don't emphasize. Insulin is not just a blood sugar hormone. Insulin is a powerful sodium-retaining hormone. It acts directly on receptors in your renal proximal tubule, the part of your kidney responsible for reabsorbing roughly 70% of your filtered sodium, and tells those cells to hold on. Pull sodium back in. Don't let it go. Sodium is retained. Water follows osmotically into your tissue. Your abdomen swells. Your face puffs. Your hands feel tight in the morning, not because of gas, because of fluid. Insulin-driven, hormonally mediated fluid retention. Now here's where cause 1 and cause 2 collide. Estrogen dominance is already driving excess aldosterone activity through the raw system, retaining sodium through one pathway, and now insulin is simultaneously activating a second, completely independent sodium retention pathway in the same kidney. Two hormonal systems, both retaining sodium, both pulling water into your tissues at the same time. And if you have any degree of insulin resistance, which is extraordinarily common and almost always silent, your baseline insulin is chronically elevated, which means this renal sodium retention isn't just happening after meals. It's happening all day, every day, even when you haven't eaten in hours. Now, yes, the mainstream answer to carb-related bloating is probiotics. And I'm not dismissing probiotics. A good probiotic supports microbial diversity and reduces fermentative gas. That's real. But a probiotic cannot reach into your renal proximal tubule and block insulin-driven sodium reabsorption. It cannot correct estrogen dominance. It cannot rebalance your ROS system. So if you've been spending money on high-dose probiotics every month, and the bloating keeps coming back, it's not because you haven't found the right strain. It's because you're treating the wrong organ. The fix lives upstream in your metabolic state, in your hormonal environment, in the signals your kidneys are receiving every hour. But before I give you the fix, I need you to understand something bigger, because what we've covered so far is only the surface of this cascade. There is an upstream ignition switch that is driving the estrogen dominance, the insulin resistance, and the motility failure simultaneously. And once you see it, you're going to realize your bloating isn't a digestive inconvenience. It's a warning signal, and your body has been sending it for a long time. I want you to reframe how you're thinking about your bloating. Not a stomach problem, not a food sensitivity, not even a hormone problem. A signal, a warning light on the dashboard of your body. Because chronic treatment-resistant bloating, the kind that doesn't respond to diet, doesn't respond to probiotics, comes back every single week, is almost never the primary problem. It is the visible surface expression of something happening much deeper. Saying, here's the domino chain. It starts with chronic stress. When your body is under sustained stress, your hypothalamus triggers cortisol release from your adrenal glands. Short bursts of cortisol are protective, adaptive. But when stress is chronic, when cortisol stays elevated week after week, something very specific happens to your gut wall. Cortisol acts directly on the epithelial cells lining your intestine and degrades the proteins holding those cells together. These proteins, occludin and claudin 1, are what maintain your intestinal barrier. When cortisol breaks them down, gaps open between cells. Bacterial toxins, lipopolysaccharides, and luminal antigens begin crossing into your bloodstream. You've heard this called leaky gut, and I know that term gets dismissed. But the research is unambiguous. Animal models subjected to sustained stress show significant cortisol-driven down-regulation of occludin and claudin-1, and when researchers administered a glucocorticoid receptor blocker, preventing cortisol from binding the intestinal permeability, was completely reversed. Direct, receptor-mediated, mechanistically documented, not a wellness trend. Now here's where it gets worse. Elevated cortisol selectively depletes lactobacillus and bifidobacterium, two of the most critical bacterial genera in your gut. These organisms produce short-chain fatty acids that feed your intestinal lining. They synthesize GABA to calm your enteric nervous system. They generate tryptophan, the precursor your gut needs to produce serotonin, and 90% of your body's serotonin is made in your gut. Serotonin is not just a mood molecule. It is a primary driver of intestinal motility. When those bacteria are depleted, something more aggressive moves in, a genus called Escherichia shigella, and this genus produces endocannabinoid-like compounds that activate a cannabinoid receptor 1 on your enteric neurons, directly suppressing acetylcholine release. Acetylcholine is the neurotransmitter that tells your gut to contract. When it's suppressed, peristalsis stalls, gas accumulates, distension worsens. Now follow the complete chain. Chronic stress elevates cortisol. Cortisol degrades your gut barrier. A compromised barrier triggers immune activation and mucosal inflammation. Inflammation disrupts enteric neuromuscular signaling. Dysbiosis depletes motility-driving neurotransmitters. Peristalsis stalls, gas is trapped, and simultaneously, cortisol is driving insulin resistance, worsening estrogen dominance, and amplifying aldosterone-driven fluid retention. Every domino we've discussed, the estrogen, the insulin, the fluid retention, the motility failure, shares one upstream ignition switch, cortisol. Your bloating is not the problem, it is the receipt. Your body printing out evidence of everything dysregulated beneath the surface. Possibly for years. The fix has to start at the top of this cascade. And that's exactly where we're going next. I want to be straight with you for a second. I've sat across from patients who did everything right. Everything they were told was right. They cut gluten, went dairy-free, spent months on elimination diets so restrictive they were barely eating anything they enjoyed. They tried every probiotic on the market, bought digestive enzymes, drank bone broth every morning, still bloated, every single day. And the most demoralizing part wasn't even the bloating itself. It was being told repeatedly that their labs were normal, nothing wrong. Maybe it's stress, maybe it's IBS, maybe track your food more carefully. I'll be honest with you. Early in my career, I was part of that system. I was looking at the gut when I should have been looking at the hormones, treating the symptom when I should have been mapping the cascade. It wasn't until I started running comprehensive hormonal panels, mid-luteal estrogen and progesterone ratios, fasting insulin, HOMA-IR scores, diurnal cortisol curves, that the pattern became impossible to ignore. Patient after patient, same fingerprint, estrogen dominance, elevated fasting insulin, a flattened or dysregulated cortisol curve. The gut wasn't the origin, it was the casualty. That realization changed everything about how I practice. And what I found, so once we stopped chasing the symptom and started correcting the hormonal environment, is that bloating that had persisted for years began resolving within weeks. Not because of a new supplement, not because of a more aggressive elimination diet, because we finally addressed the right system. The intervention that moved the needle faster than anything else was not complicated, not expensive, didn't require a prescription. It came down to specific dietary shifts, 2 micronutrients that most chronic bloating sufferers are critically deficient in, and 1 lifestyle correction that resets the cortisol-insulin-estrogen cascade from the top down. That's exactly what I'm giving you right now. Here is what the totality of the available evidence points to. And I want to be clear, this is not a supplement protocol, not a detox. This is a systematic correction of the hormonal cascade we've been mapping this entire video. It works because it addresses every layer of the domino chain simultaneously. Layer 1. Blood sugar stabilization. If insulin is chronically elevated, if your kidneys are receiving a constant sodium-retaining signal, hour after hour, nothing downstream is going to hold. You have to flatten the glucose curve first, remove refined carbohydrates and added sugars as the foundation. Not forever, not perfectly, but consistently enough that your fasting insulin begins to drop. Because as insulin drops, renal sodium retention decreases. As sodium is excreted, water follows. Within days, not weeks, patients notice their abdominal tightness beginning to ease, face less puffy in the morning, rings fitting differently. That is not placebo. That is renal physiology responding to a corrected hormonal signal. Layer 2. Resistance training. I know that sounds like a fitness recommendation dropped into a bloating video, but hear me out. Skeletal muscle is the primary site of insulin-mediated glucose disposal. The more functional muscle mass you carry, the more efficiently your body clears glucose after a meal, and the lower your baseline insulin requirement becomes. 2 to 3 sessions per week is one of the most powerful natriuretic strategies available without a prescription. It addresses the insulin-driven kidney retention pathway at its root. Layer 3, and this is the one most people are missing entirely. Magnesium combined with vitamin B6. A randomized double-blind crossover trial of 44 women showed that 200 milligrams of magnesium combined with 50 milligrams of vitamin B6 taken daily for one menstrual cycle produced significant reductions in premenstrual fluid retention compared to placebo. A subsequent double-blind trial of 126 women confirmed that while each nutrient has independent benefit, their combination produces the greatest reduction in bloating and PMS severity. Here is exactly why this works. Magnesium acts as a physiological calcium channel blocker in your enteric smooth muscle. It restores the contractile rhythm that hormonal disruption suppressed, reduces visceral cramping, gets peristalsis moving again. Simultaneously, vitamin B6 is an essential cofactor for dopamine synthesis inside the kidney itself. Renal dopamine acts as a direct natriuretic signal, telling your kidneys to excrete sodium rather than retain it. A B6 deficiency quietly removes that brake. Supplementing it restores it, so the full stack. Flatten the glucose curve. Build insulin sensitivity through resistance training. Replete magnesium and B6 to restore motility and renal natriuresis. Then, address the cortisol layer at the very top of this cascade through consistent sleep, structured stress reduction, and vagal nerve activation through diaphragmatic breathing. Every single intervention has a documented mechanistic pathway in the peer-reviewed literature. Stack them in sequence: insulin first, then the estrogen-aldosterone axis, then the enteric neuromuscular layer, and the bloating that resisted everything else begins finally to resolve. Your body has been trying to tell you something. The bloating was never the enemy, eh? It was the messenger. And now that you know what it was saying, everything changes. Now, here's what I need you to do next. Because everything we just covered, the estrogen dominance, the insulin-driven sodium retention, the cortisol cascade dismantling your gut barrier, all of it converges on one thing we haven't addressed yet: your thyroid. And this is where it gets critical, because an underactive thyroid, even a subclinical one, even one your doctor looked at and called normal, does 2 things to your gut that nothing else in this video will fix. First, it slows the migrating motor complex. The MMC is the rhythmic electrical sweep that moves waste through your small intestine between meals. When thyroid hormones drop, that sweep weakens. Transit slows. Everything stalls. Second, it reduces stomach acid production. And low stomach acid means your upper digestive tract loses its primary defense against bacterial colonization. Put those 2 things together: impaired motility and low stomach acid, and bacteria that are supposed to stay in your colon begin migrating upward into your small intestine. That condition is called small intestinal bacterial overgrowth, SIBO. And here is the number that stopped me cold when I first read this research. A landmark clinical study compared 50 hypothyroid patients against 40 healthy controls using glucose breath testing. 54% of the hypothyroid patients tested positive for SIBO. The control group is negligible, 54%. And SIBO produces the exact bloating pattern we've been describing this entire video. Diffuse, treatment-resistant, unrelated to any specific food, because it isn't about a specific food. It's about bacteria fermenting whatever you eat in a part of your digestive tract that has almost no tolerance for gas volume. Even small amounts cause significant painful distension. So here's what this means for you. If you've implemented everything in this video, stabilized blood sugar, added resistance training, started magnesium and B6, addressed your cortisol load, and you're still bloated, your thyroid is the next place to look. And TSH alone is not enough. Most people with subclinical hypothyroidism have a TSH that looks perfectly normal. You need free T3, free T4, and you need someone who knows what to do with those numbers. I put together a complete video on exactly how the thyroid drives gut dysfunction, what labs to ask for, what the research says about restoring thyroid-driven motility, and why so many people do everything right, fix their hormones, fix their insulin, fix their cortisol, and still can't get fully flat. That video explains the final piece. Watch it next. Because your bloating is going to start getting better and better, layer by layer, cascade by cascade, but only if you close every loop. And the thyroid loop? That's the one hiding in plain sight. The next video is right there. Watch it now.